And that other thing due Friday, are we doing that too?
On the what?
The other thing that's due on Friday.
Yeah, that's the poetry assignment. So it should be where you can see it. I think I built it as a page so that you can pull the assignment early if you want to do it. So that's one of those that has that little bit of flexibility to it. Okay, so let's talk about Shakespeare as a whole as an introduction. First, I know I screwed. Yesterday sucked. It's all right. We'll be good. We'll catch up. I know you didn't have Lambert last year, right? You did? So last year you at least got Shakespeare. And so you're coming back to it. You may not have touched Shakespeare since 10th grade, maybe?
No, since sophomore year.
Sophomore year, 10th grade. Okay, good. So Shakespeare takes a little bit to get your ear back. You probably did lots of work 9th grade, 10th grade with rhythm and talking about that iambic pentameter of Shakespeare, finding how he talks and doing all that. You'll find that Shakespeare has an ear to it. It takes a little bit to catch back up, but once you do, you get it. One thing that I suggest with that learning curve, if you're noticing you're really having trouble, is to use the No Fear. I think I linked to it in the page. If not, SparkNotes has that No Fear Shakespeare that will line up, hey, on this side is the original text, and on this side is a simplified text. And so especially as we begin, they're really helpful for just following what's going on. And especially with scene one can be really difficult to follow what's going on because you have no context. This is intentional on Shakespeare's part. So Shakespeare writes many times, and we'll see it even in this play many times, in what he calls in media res. He starts the scene in the middle and forces the audience to catch up with him. It's a really simple trick that you see a lot of times even in modern television. If you're watching a show and it starts out with a scene, that somebody's like running away from something and oh my God, they're screaming, and then it cuts away and then it says 3 days earlier. That's an example of kind of doing that in media res ideal, because it's like, hey, let's start you in the middle to catch your attention, and then let's go back a little bit. So when we open the play, you hear about what's going on in Denmark and what the issues are before we meet any of the main characters. Did you have any questions on the kind of what's going on pieces, or should we maybe go back over that really quickly to make sure we're all on the same page? Let's hit it just to make sure. So, Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark. Denmark is where we're going to set the whole play. Denmark used to be led by old Hamlet. But as Horatio tells us, old Hamlet is dead. Denmark is on the verge of war again with Norway. We're going to talk about this situation today through the speech that is presented in scene 2. Denmark has a dead king. Hamlet, old Hamlet, was married before he died, to Gertrude. We will see her today. They have a son, Hamlet. Hamlet is not the current king. Instead, his uncle is sitting on the throne. And so as they are talking about this possible war that is happening here, the guards have noticed that at night a ghost is showing up, and the ghost is showing up in the appearance of old Hamlet. Did the article that I posted yesterday make sense? Or did you even read the article that I posted yesterday? Let's assume not, and that will help us to explain this. Everybody's really put off by this ghost. It's freaky. Think in your own sense. If you saw a ghost at night while you're doing something, would you just be like, hey man, what's up? I know on my part, some of my friends thought it would be fun to go to a haunted hotel years ago. And I told, I was like, oh, that would be cool. I go, I don't know. And another buddy of mine was like, you know what? Here's the deal. I'll go. He said, but if we see a ghost, I'm going to crap my pants and we're leaving. And he said, and on the way out of town, we'll go to Walmart so I can change them. But seriously, like that's what's going to happen. Think about for yourself. This would be a freaky situation. So when we see these guys react to the ghost, we have to understand that their concept of a ghost is slightly different than ours. If you saw the ghost of old Hamlet now, what would you assume about that ghost? Probably that it's the ghost, it's the spirit of this person returning back, correct? In Shakespeare's time, that was not the way they viewed ghosts. They didn't see ghosts as a returned spirit. Those two things were not similar. Instead, they saw ghosts as these spirits of the afterlife that are potentially demonic. And they appear in the form of people to trick you. So as you look at scene 1, they many times mention that the ghost has the appearance of old Hamlet. They don't assume that the ghost is old Hamlet. And that's really important because otherwise you'd think, oh, this is somebody familiar. It would be like if your grandma died and then you saw a ghost that looked like your grandma. You'd be like, Grandma, I love you. Instead, they're kind of like, why is that ghost showing up to like my grandma? What's it trying to do to me? It wants to trick me. They use Horatio here. Were you able to understand Horatio's relationship? Because they kind of explain it, but not really well. Horatio is Hamlet's best friend. They're going to have to tell you this throughout the whole play because Horatio isn't in a whole lot of the play and he doesn't really do a whole lot except show up and everybody's like, hey, he's Hamlet's best friend. Or Hamlet goes, hey, buddy, you're my best friend. It's a reminder. They bring Horatio with them because Horatio goes to school with Hamlet. He's smarter than these normal guards. And so they're like, hey, you're smart. Maybe we're just stupid and we don't understand what we're seeing. And so that is why Horatio is the one that they say, hey, speak to the ghost, talk to it, because they're like, hey, you're smart. You figure out why it's here. And Horatio goes through a few questions with it. He asks him, are you here to tell me about buried treasure? Are you here to do this? And then the one question he can't get to is, hey, are you here to tell me about the nature of your death? Scene 1 functions as a way to kind of kick the play forward and give us an inciting incident. They make a plan at the end of the scene. What are these two guards and Horatio going to go do? So at the end of the scene, they say, let's go tell Hamlet. Since the ghost won't speak to us, maybe the ghost will speak to Hamlet since it's appearing in the form of his father. And there's one thing we want to add to this ghost. They say it is dressed for war. And so they see it as a potential omen because everybody is freaked out about what's going on with Norway and the potential for war. They're worried that this ghost is appearing like their old dead king dressed for battle to tell them, hey, we're going to war. Things are going to get bad. And so that's why they're like, if we bring Hamlet, maybe the ghost will speak to Hamlet and tell us what's going on. Maybe that's why it's showing up this way. Everybody got that? We're going to start with scene 2. Now, if you take a look, as we start scene 2, we change the place setting. In scene 1, we're outside. We're on the platform of the watch. So think about if you can picture a castle in your head, and castles have that top wall to them. The platform of the watch could be up on the wall. It could be outside the gates. Could be a lot of places. But now we are coming inside. Elsinore Castle is the fake castle of Denmark that he names. It's not a real place. This is the audience chamber. And so we need to think back to Shakespeare's time, to the way that kings and queens would hold court. And so the king and queen would sit at the front of the room. They would have their advisors. They would have anybody else that's there to conduct business. So we notice that it tells us who is there. We have Claudius, who is the king, Gertrude the queen, Hamlet, Polonius, Laertes, his sister Ophelia, and then it says Lord's attendant. This scene can change depending on the size and scope of your production. So if you have a smaller production, you only need these characters on stage. If you have some extra people, maybe you make it look like there's a big crowd. It really depends on what you're doing. Let's talk about Claudius for a second. So Claudius is now the king. He's now married to Gertrude. Claudius is also old Hamlet's brother. And so if I had done the family tree better, it would look nicer, but I screwed it up. Anyway, you're going, wait a second. He died and his brother married his sister-in-law? I thought you said we were done with incest after Oedipus. Calm down. We don't quite know the level of what's going on between these two. But we do need to take note of the fact that, hey, something doesn't look right here. Especially when we consider the fact that we're talking about monarchy. Tell me what you know about monarchies. Kings, queens, stuff like that. Know much? No? Do you know much? Yeah? What do you know?
That's all I got is like kings, queens, like they rule, like whatever they say is what people do.
Absolutely. What about progression of kings and queens? What do you know? Anything?
Their family.
So it could come from family. You know, if we look at a lot of the English lineage, it tends to be passed hereditarily. So if you look at, like, for example, the current Queen of England, the longest reigning monarch in European history, Queen Elizabeth. She's like 95, I think, or 96. She's been on the throne since she was in her 20s, right? She took it from her father after he died. Her son is the next in line. Her son is 70 some years old. He is the longest kind of heir to the throne in any kind of history that anybody can document. We could be looking at a situation where poor Charles dies before his mother does. That's unlikely because most of the people, his father is 99. The Queen Mother, Elizabeth's mother, she lived until her 90s. A lot of them were long-lived. So likely Charles isn't going to, but it's a weird situation. We don't know how this works here in Denmark, but we know that Claudius is now on the throne. So we can assume some things. We can assume that a choice was made to put him on the throne. And here, as we look at this opening speech of scene 2, this is the first time that he is going to address the assembled court, everybody that's there. So we need to flip on our rhetoric hat for a little bit. Shakespeare is really interesting in his works because he's able to work with both rhetoric and literature at the same time. And so he builds these wonderful speeches that exist within this literary framework. We're going to see Claudius make a case for why he is king, for how he is feeling, and he's going to compel his people. And so as we look at this opening speech, I want you to pay attention to how is he framing it. We know his audience is the assembled court, the people that he now represents. How is he going to appeal to them? How is he going to win them over that, yes, I know that this kid should be on the throne. Now, by kid, Hamlet is probably in his 20s. I know he should be on the throne, but here's why I am. And so we're going to play the audio. Follow along here in the book And then, like I said, you have those two sets of notes. So maybe one thing to look at, take a look at that red text on the side on 27 before we start, just to give you that little bit of context before we get going. You good? You ready? Here we go.
Oh, yes, of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, remember to be grieved. And that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one proud woe. Yet, so far hath discretion fought with nature, that we with wisest sorrow think on him, together with remembrance of ourselves. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointures of this warlike state, have we, as 'twere, with a defeated joy, with one auspicious and one drooping eye, with mirth in funeral and with dirge in marriage, in equal scale weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. Or have we here in part your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with us affair along, for all our thanks. Now follow.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's look at this first part of his speech. What are some of the things you notice him doing to kind of appeal to his audience? Remember, he's well aware of the fact that he's not next in line. Hamlet should be. And so he's kind of sitting here because if you don't, even if you know, we did talk about succession. Once a king has a male son, the male son becomes the successor. Or even sometimes the child themselves can become the successor over a sibling. So for example, if you look, Queen Elizabeth had a sister, but she was younger. So Queen Elizabeth then had a son. Because she had a son, her sister is now out of the picture completely. Her son is Charles. Charles has 4 siblings. 3 siblings. There's 4 altogether. So Charles, he has a sister who's younger, then he has 2 brothers. So by succession, would have been Charles and his sister. But the second that Charles had a son, his sister and all the others went out the window. They're done. Same thing if you know anything about Prince Harry. He married Meghan Markle, maybe. Prince Harry, he has an older brother, Prince William. Prince William has 3 children. The first one was a male. So imagine, you're Prince Harry. You're like, maybe my brother will die. Maybe it'll be me. And instead it's like, nope, that little kid. Thanks a lot. So he's got to address the court to tell them, this is why I am leader. What do you notice him doing in this speech? All right, so first, do you notice the pronoun usage? What do you notice him doing with his pronouns?
He's using our.
Our and we. Notice in the first line, he talks about our dear brother's death. Well, is it everybody's brother? No, it's just his. But all of a sudden, by including our and we're all here. And he even says it's one brow of woe. Wow, look at how quickly that unifies everyone into a collective whole rather than making it all about him. Rather than getting up and saying, I'm so sad that my brother is dead. Our brother has died. We are all unified in our grief together. Suddenly, boom, everybody's with him. Instead of looking at this and going, why are you there? He's changed it to go, we're all sad together. And they're like, we are. It's a great use there. So then you kind of come down and you notice the we's continue. And so he gets into this whole thing of talking about their sorrow and their grief. He ends the first sentence in line 7 and then changes with therefore. And again, we keep our pronouns there. Our sometimes sister, if this is our brother, she's technically our sister, now our queen. Then look at line 9. The imperial jointress to this warlike state. We know that we're on the brink of war with Norway. We refocus our audience's attention onto our queen, who is the imperial jointress. She's the one who's now here in this warlike state. Have we, as twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a drooping eye, with mirth and funeral, with dirge and marriage. Look at your, we don't have either of those defined in here. Do you know what mirth or dirge is? A dirge is a funeral song. Mirth is sadness. And so when you're looking at this, have they decided to get married because they're hot for each other? Why did they get married? Because she is the imperial jointress to this warlike state. We need to be strong. And so with mirth and funeral, with dirge and marriage, in equal scale weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. Notice that he never uses I. He instead talks about we. We've married her. And you're going, okay. So it's not about him. It's about the state. It's about everybody. And then he has this little line, your better wisdoms which have freely gone with this affair along. Or he says, nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms. So have people had opinions about this? Oh, yeah, 100%. And so he's like, hey, we get it. We heard you. Thank you. So he's acknowledging there to say, hey, we heard you. Not that we're going to actually follow you. We heard what you said. Thank you for speaking up. Now he's going to turn his attention to their enemy. He's already said, we've done this because we need a strong front on this war. Let's talk about this war. So now we're going to talk about Fortinbras. Let's fill in some of this Norway side a little bit. They introduced it really quick in scene 1. Here in Norway, we have old Fortinbras, who used to be the king. He went to war with old Hamlet. Old Hamlet killed him. And took these lands of Norway's. Well, old Fortinbras had a son. And his name was Fortinbras. But guess what? Fortinbras isn't on the throne. Instead, Fortinbras' uncle, old Norway, is on the throne. He's the king. Hey, what do you notice? They're exactly the same. We're going to use Fortinbras as a foil for Hamlet through the play, because we notice here in scene 1, we're on the verge of war because Fortinbras has gathered this secret army. And they're looking to move, but nobody knows when or what. And so in this next part of the speech, Claudius is going to address Norway and the problem of Fortinbras and what he wants to do in this next part. So again, look at how he's going to use his rhetoric to help to bring these people together to a shared vision.
Those that you know, young Fortinbras, holding a weak supposal of our worth, or thinking by our late dear brother's death, our state to be disjointed out of frame, collegiated with the dream of his advantage. He had not failed to pester us with message importing the surrender of those lands lost by his father, with all bonds of law, to our most valiant brother. So much for him. Now,
Okay, so before we get to the next part, let's talk about Fortinbras. Do you notice these pronouns continue? We are still talking about this united front. Notice how he describes Fortinbras. Young. When you get described as being young, what does that imply?
Immature.
Immature. Less than. So here, young Fortinbras, notice what he says. He holds a weak supposal of our worth, or thinking by our late brother's death, our state to be disjointed and out of frame. What are they? Disjointed? Because he's made the argument at the beginning, they're not. He says, hey, Gertrude is the imperial jointress, and we have fortified that by marrying. So we are not weak. Because they think we are disjointed and out of frame, colleagued with this dream of his advantage, he hath not failed to pester us with message importing the surrender of those lands lost by his father. He wants these lands back that were taken before, and so he ends it by saying, so much for him. Let me explain to you what gesture would probably go with that phrase. Would look like this. Close to you. So much for him. Ah! F him. Notice that everybody's cheering. Yeah! Because he's won them over. Not only has he explained why he should be king, not only has he explained all this, but notice that he also focuses not on their strength as much as this guy thinks we're weak. So it's not so much, hey, we're going to get over this sorrow. We're going to be good. He's like, we need to because they think we're less than. Everybody's all of a sudden going to buy in when you're like, I'm not less than. I'm not weak. Let's get him. Yeah. So now he's going to talk about what they're going to do in this next part.
for ourselves and for this time of meeting. Thus much the business is. We have here writ to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, who impotent and bedrid, scarcely hears that this is nephew's purpose, to suppress his further gate hearing, in that the levies, the lists, and full proportions are all made out of his subject. And we here dispatch you, good Cornelius, and you, Voltimand, for bearers of this greeting to old Norway, giving to you no further personal power to business with the king, more than the scope of these dilated articles allow. Farewell, and let your haste commend your duty.
In that and all things we shall do.
We doubted nothing. Heartily farewell.
Okay, so before we let the king go on, what is his plan? What's he going to do? So look down to like line 27 and 28. We have writ to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, the current king. We're going to write to him to tell him what he's doing. Why is he going to write him a letter to tell him what he's doing? How does he insult him? Look at line 29. He's bedridden, sick, and he's impotent. Do you know what that word means? If a man is impotent, he cannot produce children. He is weak. He is less than. And so that is a major insult, man, to throw out. This guy doesn't know what his nephew is doing because he's impotent and he's bedridden. If the crowd already reacted when they were like, they think we're weak, and they're like, we're not weak. When it's like, hey, this king over here, he's impotent and bedridden. They're all going to go, yeah, he is. He sucks. But notice that he's clear on these people want to attack us. We're not going to attack. We're going to make it clear. You fix your house. You fix your problems because I fixed this house. We're strong. So he sends Cornelius and Voltaman, hey, go take this letter. Don't do anything else. Just deliver the letter and then come back. He's now going to turn his attention towards the rest of the court because he's already established himself as king here. This first speech is effective in the rhetoric because he unites his people, he shows his strength and purpose, and he sets an objective forward. He's now going to turn his attention to Laertes. This is a separate family. So here in Denmark, Polonius is an advisor to the king. He is an older man. He has 2 children. Laertes is his older son, and Ophelia is his daughter. Laertes is going to ask to go back to school. This would be a courtesy. He doesn't have to literally ask, can I leave? This is a courtesy to the king. It's going to give Polonius a chance to answer. His answer is going to characterize Polonius to you. And so pay attention to that. Once we have the back and forth between Laertes and Polonius, we're then going to introduce Hamlet. Now, if you notice at the beginning of the act, that little note that I had you read tells you that Hamlet is dressed all in black. He is the only person on stage who is dressed all in black. You notice that his first line here is an aside. Remember, if you've forgotten, that an aside is a line that is heard by the audience but not by anyone else on stage. So imagine that this is something Hamlet thinks before he answers. If a production does this right, the audience almost doesn't see Hamlet until he speaks. Because he's wearing black, he's often hidden in the shadows. He's not looking for attention. And so the attention only comes to him when Claudius moves it to him. So 1, we're going to look for how Polonius is characterized, and then 2, we're going to look at how Hamlet's reaction kind of helps us to understand him.
Farewell.
Anna! Laertes! What's the news with you? You told us of some suit. What is Laertes? Well, you cannot speak of reason to the Dane and lose your voice. What wouldst thou beg, Laertes, that should have been my offer, not thy asking? The head is not more native to the heart, the hand more instrumental to the mouth. That is the throne of Denmark to thy father. What wouldst thou have, Laertes?
Dread, my lord, your leave and favour to return to France. From whence, though willingly I came to Denmark to show my duty in your coronation, yet now I must confess that duty done, my thoughts and wishes bend again towards France, and bow them to your gracious leave and pardon.
Have you your father's leave? Well, what says Polonius?
He hath, my lord, wrung from me my slow leave by laboursome petition. And at last upon his will I sealed my hard consent. I do beseech you, give him leave to go.
Take thy fare out, Laertes, time be thine, and thy best grace is, spend it at thy will. And now, my cousin Hamlet, and my son.
A little more than kin, and less than kind.
How is it that the clouds still hang on you?
Not so, my lord, I am too much i' the sun.
Good Hamlet, cast thy nighted colour off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity.
Ay, ma'am, it is common.
If it be, why seems it so particular with thee?
Seems, madam? Nay, it is. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected behaviour of the visage, together with all forms, moves, shows of grief that can denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play. But I have that within me, which passeth show. These but the trappings and the suits of the world.
Okay. Let's bring this in and let's start with talking about Polonius. So the king asks Laertes asked the king a simple courtesy. I need to go back to school in France. The king asks a simple bit. Hey, what says your father? Polonius. Polonius' answer should be simple, right? Is it cool with you if your son goes back to school? His answer should be what? Yes. Look at his answer. Polonius is a teetering old fool. He can't say one thing, he needs to say 5 things. He will never shut up. He is the closest thing that we have in this play to comedic relief. And so notice here, rather than just saying, hey, can your son go? And he goes, yes. He goes, he hath wrung from me, my lord. And he usually has that high, raspy, reedy voice. He needs to be annoying. The audience needs to look at this guy and go, how? You're so old. How do you have children that are this age? Who would have sex with you? Like, oh my lord. He's annoying. And so as we go on, we will notice that this is a quality that's important because he is the counselor to the king. And so we're going to play that up later in the work. We get rid of them. Bye, see you, go to school. Then we turn our eye to Hamlet. And you notice that the king makes this transition. He says, now my cousin, and my son, because, I married your mom. I'm now your Uncle Dad. Look at Hamlet's aside. How would you describe that line? Is it sarcastic? I'm going to tell you, yes, it is. It's also got that pun nature to it. Hamlet is going to speak in sarcasm and in puns because he's upset. Hamlet's the only one dressed in black. But if you notice from the king's speech at the beginning of the scene, he says that our memories of old Hamlet are still green. Old Hamlet hasn't been dead for years or months. If it has been a month, that's a long time. Hamlet is the only one that is still grieving his father. Even his mother is dressed not in black, and usually it is the widow that does hold that longer. He's upset, he's hurt. And so when he comes out of the shadows like that emo kid that's dressed all in black that just wants to spew venom at everybody. And you notice him doing it. When that first question comes out, the king says, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? Why are you still sad, buddy? And Hamlet just comes back at him. Not so, my lord. I'm too much in the sun. He doesn't want it to be S-U-N. He's trying to pun S-O-N. Stop calling me son, Uncle Dad. You're not my dad. My dad's dead. You just married my mom. So he's trying to be sarcastic. But nobody gives it to him. Instead, his mother follows up. Come on, man. Cast your knighted colors off. Let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. She says, it's common. All things that live must die. It's normal. Is this a surprise to anybody here that things die? Shouldn't be. We know that. But Hamlet's going to pun again because common has 2 definitions. Yes, it is universally true, but common can also be a way to talk down to someone. You're acting commonly, like a commoner, less than. So when he says, aye, man, 'tis common, it's his way of being, yeah, I get it. It's normal. But yeah, the way that you're acting is disgusting. And so she just doesn't. She says, okay, fine, if you get it, then why is it so particular with you? Why are you so sad? And he goes into this whole thing to say, oh, no, it's not seems. It doesn't seem like it's this with me. It's not just that I'm wearing all black. It's not just that I'm crying. It's not just that I'm upset. It's not just all those things. It's that I have the actual emotions behind it. It's not a play that I'm putting on. I feel this and I haven't moved on, and none of you are willing to acknowledge that. He's bothered and he's upset. Where we're going to pick up tomorrow is this speech from the king. And once again, we're going to turn our rhetorical eye to it because we're going to notice this is going to help us to set up our antagonism. We will also get to Hamlet's first soliloquy tomorrow. Our goal this week, we're going to chop out a good part of Act 1 together and leave the rest to read independently for next week. We will also be doing some poetry work on Friday. So if you do me a favor, if you have a sticky note, put your name on the front of that. Here, I have one here if you want. And then if you'll just put them on the back table